Walk into a grocery store today and the meat case can look completely normal. Ribeyes are there, ground beef is there, chuck roasts are there, and nothing looks empty enough to make you think something has changed. But underneath that familiar display, a quieter shift has been happening for years. Some cuts that used to be cheap, ignored, or known mostly by butchers have become harder to find in ordinary supermarkets. Not because America is running out of beef, and not because there's some secret shortage nobody's telling you about. The real reason is much simpler. Demand changed faster than supply. Chefs discovered the cuts, restaurants started buying them in volume, home cooks learned their names, and several of these muscles exist in such small amounts on each animal that once people started wanting them, there was never much extra to go around. My name is Marcus, and today I am showing you 9 cuts that are quietly becoming harder to find in the average grocery store, why people who understand meat move quickly when they see them, and exactly what you should ask for before somebody else gets there first. Some of these were once the pieces nobody wanted. They were cheap because they looked rough, needed trimming, or required cooking knowledge. Now the same cuts appear on steakhouse menus, taco menus, and chef specials. That changes the economics. A cut does not need to disappear from the beef supply to disappear from your supermarket. If restaurants, specialty distributors, and informed shoppers take a limited cut first, the ordinary meat case can simply stop showing it. And that is the real story behind this list. And there is one detail I want you to keep in mind as we count down. Harder to find does not mean gone everywhere. Regional availability can be completely different. A cut that is common in Texas may be rare in another state, while something routine in California may barely appear in the Midwest. If this is the kind of butcher counter knowledge you want more of, subscribe now, because I want to help you recognize value before the rest of the market catches up. No panic buying, no fake shortage stories, just knowing what to ask for, when to buy it, and why an ugly little cut can sometimes beat the expensive steak beside it. Number 9 is organ meats, and I am grouping liver, tongue, kidney, heart, and beef cheek together because they show the same change from different angles. These were once normal household foods. Families used them because wasting edible meat made no sense, and stores carried them because customers knew what to do with them. Then demand fell, and supermarkets moved towards standardized prepackaged meat. If a product did not sell quickly, it lost shelf space. That is why you can now see a case full of steaks, but no cheek, tongue, or heart. Meanwhile, chefs rediscovered those same parts. Tongue became popular for tacos, cheek for rich braises, heart for grilling, and nose to tail cooking brought attention back to offal. Beef cheek is especially worth knowing because its collagen turns silky after a long, slow cook. There are only 2 cheeks on an animal, and they are not large, so restaurant demand can absorb them quickly. Do not wait for organ meats to appear in foam trays. Ask the butcher to order them. If your family still cooks one of these cuts, tell me which one in the comments, because that kind of kitchen knowledge is disappearing almost as fast as the meat itself. Number 8 is short ribs. These used to be inexpensive because they were thought of as braising meat, bone, fat, connective tissue, and plenty of flavor, but not a quick steak. Then braised short ribs became a restaurant favorite, while Korean barbecue made thin, flanken-cut ribs familiar to millions more people. Food service can buy cases at a time, and the amount available from each carcass does not expand because demand does. Prices climbed, and good short ribs became less reliable in ordinary stores. Learn the 2 common cuts. English cut ribs are thick portions usually built around one bone. Flanken, or Korean-style ribs, are cut across several bones into thinner strips. Ask for the style you actually need. When you see thick, meaty, short ribs at a sensible price, that is the kind of package experienced cooks do not leave behind. That regional difference is why price alone can fool you too. A cut can still be cheap near a processor or in a community that regularly cooks it, while the same item becomes a specialty product 2 states away. What matters is whether your local supply can keep up with the new demand. Number 7 is oxtail. Nothing shows the change in value better. Oxtail spent generations as inexpensive food because it was bony, needed hours of cooking, and was considered a leftover part. But slow cooking turns the bone, connective tissue, fat, and meat into an extraordinarily rich braise. Caribbean, Korean, European, and restaurant cooking all helped drive new demand. The supply problem is obvious. One animal has one tail. You cannot produce more oxtails from the same steer because a restaurant wants 20 cases. So oxtail did not disappear from cattle. It disappeared from the bargain bin. In many places, it now costs more than cuts that once ranked far above it. Full-service butchers and ethnic markets are often your best bet. If you find it at a price you're comfortable with, buy what you will use and freeze extra portions. Number 6 is tri-tip. For years, this bottom sirloin cut was strongly regional, especially around California and Santa Maria barbecue. Outside that region, many shoppers barely knew the name, which kept demand modest and prices attractive. Then grilling culture and online barbecue pushed tri-tip nationwide. People discovered that it gives you strong beef flavor, enough marbling to stay interesting, and a roast large enough to feed several people without paying ribeye prices. But each carcass only supplies a limited number. In some regions, tri-tip remains easy to find. In others, it shows up and disappears quickly. Ask the butcher even when you do not see it. They may have it in back or be able to order it. Grill it, rest it, and watch the grain because its direction changes across the roast. Slice against that grain, and it eats far more tender. Number 5 is teres major, also called petite tender. This is a small shoulder muscle that does relatively little work compared with much of the chuck around it, which makes it surprisingly tender. Properly trimmed, it resembles a miniature tenderloin and can come close to a filet mignon tenderness while delivering more beef character for much less money. So why is it rare? Somebody has to know exactly where it is and take the time to separate it cleanly. In a case-ready supermarket system, that extra butchery often never happens. The shoulder becomes standardized roasts, steaks, or grind, and the petite tender disappears inside the process. Chefs and butchers know its value, and the few individual pieces do not last long. Go to a shop that still breaks down meat and ask specifically for teres major or petite tender. If it is not in the case, that does not mean they cannot get it. Number 4 is flat iron. It also comes from the shoulder, specifically the top blade area. The muscle itself is tender and well marbled, but a tough seam of connective tissue runs through it. When that seam is removed correctly, you get a flat, even steak with excellent beef flavor and tenderness that can compete with far more expensive cuts. Flat iron became famous precisely because it offered premium performance at chuck prices. Then everyone learned the secret. Restaurants added it, home cooks bought it, demand rose, and the cheap little butcher discovery stopped being quite so cheap. Extraction also takes more skill than simply slicing a strip loin, so some supermarkets do not merchandise it. It can still be a terrific value. And if you see a clean flat iron at a fair price, buy it while it is there. High heat and simple seasoning are all it needs. Number 3 is skirt steak, and here you need to know the difference between inside and outside skirt. Both are long, thin, coarse-grained cuts with serious beef flavor, but outside skirt is generally the more tender and more coveted piece. It is the one many chefs and serious fajita cooks want. Restaurant demand changed the economics of skirt steak years ago. Fajitas turned a formerly inexpensive fibrous cut into a sought-after item, and steakhouses and Latin restaurants compete for the better outside skirt. Less of that premium skirt makes it to ordinary retail. A package may simply say skirt steak, so ask whether it is inside or outside. If the price is reasonable, outside skirt is the one I move on first. Cook it hot and fast. Rest it briefly, then slice thin across the grain. That last step is essential. Number 2 is bavette, also called sirloin flap, flap meat, or flap steak. It comes from the bottom sirloin and has long been one of those cuts butchers appreciate more than casual shoppers. The grain is loose and coarse, the flavor is strong, and it absorbs marinades beautifully. It is not filet soft, but when sliced correctly, it gives you a beefy steak with character for far less than many famous cuts. Restaurants learned that bavette works for steak plates, tacos, sandwiches, and sliced dishes, so food service buyers can take significant volume. Depending on where you live, supermarkets may not label it separately at all. Some warehouse stores carry it regionally, while independent butchers are often better. Learn all 4 names. Asking for bavette might get a blank stare in one shop, while sirloin flap gets you exactly what you wanted in another. Number 1 is hanger steak, the original butcher's steak. Hanger earned that nickname because butchers historically knew how good it was and often kept it rather than trying to sell customers an unfamiliar, rough-looking muscle. It sits near the diaphragm, has deep beef flavor, good marbling, and can be remarkably tender once the central membrane is removed. Then chefs discovered what butchers already knew. Hanger became a favorite for steak frites, tacos, and restaurant specials. Demand exploded against an extremely small supply because there is only one hanger per animal, commonly around 1.5 pounds, give or take. That is the whole problem in one sentence. One animal, one hanger. If restaurants want them every week, there's not much left for a supermarket display. People who know the cut often ask what day the butcher gets deliveries and show up early. If the butcher will sell it with the center membrane still attached, take it and learn to trim it yourself. That small amount of work can be the difference between getting the steak and hearing that it already sold. That is also why I do not recommend chasing any of these cuts at any price. The whole point is value. If popularity has pushed the price beyond what the cut gives you, walk away and wait. But when a rare butcher cut appears at a fair number, hesitation is what usually sends you home empty-handed. And that brings us to the bigger question. Why are so many old butcher cuts following the same path at the same time? The answer is not a shortage. It is the way the meat business itself has changed. The first reason these cuts are getting harder to find is the rise of what people now call butcher's cuts. That name sounds fashionable today, but the idea is old. A butcher breaking down an animal always knew there were small muscles with terrific flavor that were difficult to merchandise because customers did not recognize the names. Hanger, bavette, flat iron, teres major, skirt, even certain organ meats fit that story in different ways. If nobody asked for them, the butcher could take them home, sell them cheaply to a regular customer, grind them, or fold them into another product. Their low price was not proof that they were poor quality. Often it was proof that demand was low. Then chefs started putting those cuts on menus and explaining why they were special. Food television, restaurant culture, barbecue channels, tacos, Korean barbecue, steak frites, and social media did the rest. Suddenly, the secret had an audience. Once a cut becomes fashionable, the economics change quickly because the animal does not respond to popularity. You can increase the number of cattle processed, but you cannot make one steer produce 4 hanger steaks instead of 1. You cannot add extra tails, extra cheeks, or unlimited petite tenders. That fixed yield is the second reason these cuts disappear quickly when demand spikes. Hanger is the cleanest example. One animal gives you 1. Oxtail is the same basic problem. Short ribs come from a limited section. Teres major is small. Outside skirt is limited. When a restaurant group wants a steady weekly supply, a distributor may commit much of that production before an ordinary grocery shopper ever sees it. Restaurants accelerate the effect because a household buys 1 or 2 pieces while food service buys cases. A chef who keeps hanger, skirt, or short ribs on the menu needs a dependable weekly supply so scarce cuts can be committed before retail shoppers ever see them. The pandemic-era supply disruptions added another push. When familiar steaks became expensive or inconsistent, home cooks and restaurants experimented with alternatives such as tri-tip, flat iron, skirt, and chuck. Some of those substitutions became permanent preferences. The disruptions did not create these trends, but they accelerated demand and exposed how dependent modern meat retail is on centralized processing and predictable product flows. The third reason is less glamorous. Modern supermarkets do less traditional butchery in the store. More beef arrives case-ready, already portioned, vacuum-packed, tray-packed, or fabricated at a centralized facility. That system is efficient. It improves consistency, reduces labor, and lets large chains sell enormous quantities of familiar cuts. But efficiency has a trade-off. A specialized muscle that requires somebody to recognize it, seam it out, trim connective tissue, and sell it under a name customers may not understand is exactly the kind of item a standardized system can leave behind. Teres major is a perfect example. It is buried in the shoulder and needs deliberate fabrication. Flat iron requires dealing with that connective seam through the top blade. Hanger needs trimming around its central membrane. If there is no experienced butcher breaking down those sections behind the counter, those muscles may enter some other product instead of becoming the steak you wanted. This is one reason a real independent butcher can feel like an entirely different meat market from a supermarket case. The independent shop can respond to a request. If enough customers ask for bavette, the butcher starts saving bavette. If people ask for cheeks, cheeks stop disappearing into another channel. Demand can actually teach a shop what is worth merchandising. Now, what should you actually do with this information? First, stop treating the supermarket display as a complete inventory of the animal. The case shows what the store expects to sell easily, Not every worthwhile muscle available from beef. Find a butcher who actually cuts meat, whether that is an independent shop, a good service counter, a specialty market, or a smaller grocery with experienced cutters. Then build a relationship. You do not need to become somebody's best friend. Just ask clear questions, come back, and buy what you order. A butcher remembers the customer who says, if you get a hanger next Thursday, please hold one for me, and then actually shows up Thursday. That reliability works both ways. Second, ask for cuts by name and know the alternate names. Bavette may be called sirloin flap, flat meat, or flap steak. Terrace major may be petite tender. Short ribs may need to be specified as English cut or flanken. Skirt may be inside or outside. The more precise you are, the easier it is for the butcher to tell you whether they have what you want or can order it. Do not be embarrassed if a regional naming system is different. Beef terminology changes, and not every American cut has a perfect one-to-one equivalent in another country. The point is to describe the muscle or preparation clearly enough that the person cutting knows what you mean. Third, learn the delivery schedule. This is probably the most practical trick in the whole video. Rare cuts do not have to be permanently unavailable to feel impossible to find. If a store receives specialty beef on Friday morning and the hanger is gone by Friday afternoon, the person shopping Sunday concludes the store never carries hanger. Ask what day deliveries come in. Ask when the butcher normally breaks down the cases, then arrive during that window. The people who buy them fast are often not buying huge quantities. They simply know when to look. Fourth, when you find a genuinely good price, buy enough for later and freeze it properly. I'm not telling you to clear the shelf. Leave some for the next person. But if you have been trying to find outside skirt for a month and suddenly the butcher has several beautiful pieces at a fair price, buying an extra one for the freezer is reasonable. Wrap it tightly, remove as much air as practical, label it, date it, and rotate what you store. A freezer gives you the power to shop when the cut is available instead of forcing you to find it on the exact day you want to cook it. That is especially useful with items like hanger, teres major, and beef cheek that may appear irregularly. Fifth, learn basic trimming. This is where the average shopper gives up and the butcher saves money. A hanger may still have its central membrane. Bavette can look rough around the edges. Teres major may need some silver skin removed. Outside skirt may need cleanup. None of that makes the meat bad. It makes it less convenient. Convenience has value, but if you can use a sharp knife and recognize connective tissue, you can buy pieces other shoppers reject because they do not look like neat supermarket steaks. That little bit of skill expands what your butcher can sell you. Sometimes the reason a cut is not available is that the fully trimmed retail version is not available. The whole muscle may be sitting 10 feet away waiting for somebody willing to finish the job. And sixth, know when not to buy. Popularity can destroy the value that made a butcher cut attractive in the first place. Oxtail is the clearest warning. It was once cheap because people overlooked it. In some markets, it now carries a luxury price. Skirt steak can do the same thing. Hanger can become expensive enough that ribeye starts looking competitive. The fact that a cut is rare does not automatically make it a bargain. Compare the price per pound, think about yield, and remember how you intend to cook it. I want you buying these cuts because they give you something special, not because somebody online told you to chase scarcity. Which one of the 9 has become ridiculously expensive where you live? Put the cut and the price in the comments. That tells us more about the real market than any national average ever could. There's also a cooking lesson hidden inside this entire trend. These cuts became beloved because skilled cooks knew how to treat them. Hanger, bavette, skirt, and flat iron generally reward hot, fast cooking, and careful slicing. Their grain is obvious, especially on skirt and bavette, so cutting across the grain shortens the muscle fibers and changes the bite dramatically. A tri-tip is larger and needs more controlled roasting or grilling, followed by careful slicing because the grain changes direction. Short ribs, oxtail, and beef cheek go the other direction entirely. Their connective tissue is not something you defeat with a hotter grill. You give it time. Slow, moist cooking turns collagen into gelatin and creates the richness that made restaurants fall in love with them. Organ meats each have their own rules. Heart can be grilled quickly if trimmed correctly. Tongue needs long cooking before peeling and slicing. Liver punishes overcooking. The cut is only half the equation. Technique is what unlocks the value everybody is chasing. That is why this story is not really about meat disappearing. It is about knowledge becoming valuable again. For years, the easiest supermarket system rewarded familiarity. Ribeye, strip, tenderloin, ground beef, chuck roast. Everything else stayed cheap because fewer people knew what to do with it. And then cooks started sharing the old knowledge at scale. The hidden muscles got names, the names got menus, the menus created demand. Demand met fixed supply, and the cheap cuts stopped behaving like cheap cuts. Hanger became the butcher secret everybody knows. Oxtail became a luxury. Skirt became a restaurant commodity. Flat iron became a mainstream steak. Terrace major stayed rare because fabrication still limits it. Beef cheeks became something diners would pay real money for. None of that requires a conspiracy. It is ordinary supply and demand working on an animal that only has so many muscles. So here is the practical list one more time. Organ meats, especially beef cheek, tongue, heart, liver, and kidney. Short ribs, both English and flank and cut. Oxtail, tri-tip, terrace major, or petite tender. Flat iron, skirt steak, especially outside skirt. Bavette, also called sirloin flap, and hanger steak. 9 categories worth learning before your next meat counter trip. Find a real butcher, ask for them by name, learn the delivery day. Be willing to trim a whole muscle yourself. Buy a sensible extra when the price is genuinely good and freeze it instead of waiting until the night you need it. And never confuse hard to find with worth any price. The people getting these cuts first are not necessarily hoarding meat. Most of the time, they just know what they are looking at. They know a hanger is scarce because there is only one on the animal. They know outside skirt gets pulled toward restaurant demand. They know petite tender may never reach the display unless somebody asks for it. They know cheeks and tails cannot be manufactured in greater numbers just because a menu trend takes off. And they know that by the time a forgotten cut becomes famous, the bargain phase is usually ending. That is the advantage I want you to have. Not fear, timing, not stockpiling, knowledge. The next time the meat case looks ordinary, look past the obvious stakes and ask one question. What came in today that most customers do not know to ask for? That question can still uncover some of the best beef in the building. And if you had to choose only one cut from this list to find this week, which one would you hunt for first?